When did someone make you a promise they knew they'd break? When I was 8, a couple pulled up to our group home in a BMW. We need you to pretend to be our son for one day, the man said. 8 years ago, we gave our son up, but my parents don't know. They think their grandson is still with us, his wife chimed in. If you come to the party and convince them you're their grandson, we'll split the money with you. From the window, I glanced over at my little sister Maya, still sitting in her wheelchair. We needed $120,000 for a transplant, or she'd die. Okay, I nodded. In the Tesla, Ashley, the woman, coached me. Your room at home has dinosaur wallpaper. You love soccer. You're shy, but warming up to them. We've done this once before, and it was fine, so try not to worry too much. When the door opened, this perfumed woman in pearls collapsed onto me. My grandson! My baby! She sobbed into my new shirt. Her arms shook. 4 years. It's been 4 years since I held you. I'd never been hugged like that, like I mattered. Though you're smaller than I expected. Tom was such a big baby. My chest tightened. Inside, relatives swarmed. These people touched me like I was precious. Cousins grabbed my hands, pulled me to their table. We've been waiting to see you again for so long. The food made me want to cry. Shrimp with tails, steak that cut like butter. At the group home, meat came frozen in bulk, vegetables from dented cans. I ate until my stomach hurt, terrified it would disappear. Grandma Ellen never stopped touching me. Hand on my shoulder, fingers through my hair, palm against my cheek. It took everything in me not to flinch. Too skinny. Haven't they been feeding you enough? I just smiled and hoped she wouldn't ask anything else. Grandpa Frank handed me a glove that smelled like hope. Been oiling this every month since your last visit. In the backyard, he taught me to throw. Funny, he said after a few catches. You were left-handed last time we played. Guess you grew out of it. His eyebrows furrowed. But that wasn't even the craziest part. Because when I missed, he didn't shove me to the floor or remind me that I was worthless. He just said, good try. Like it was okay to miss sometimes. Ellen appeared with lemonade and an old photo album. Look what I found. You at age 4. She showed me a picture of a blonde toddler. The sun really darkened your hair, she said slowly, but her smile seemed forced now. I just focused on drinking the lemonade, but I reached too eagerly. My elbow caught the tray. Lemonade and glass shattered across their white marble patio. The sticky liquid spread like blood. I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I dropped to my knees, grabbing napkins, trying to soak it up. Maya needed this money. I'll fix it. I scrubbed harder, but the napkins just spread the mess. Sweetheart, stop. Ellen's voice was soft. You'll cut yourself on the glass. I can clean it, please. But that's when I realized I grabbed the wrong cleaner from under their outdoor bar. The marble started discoloring, white streaks across the expensive stone. No, 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 no. Tears burned my eyes. Hey, buddy. Frank's hands gently pulled me up. It's just a patio. We can replace stone. I ruined it. My voice cracked. Ellen wrapped her arms around me. Oh, honey, no. Accidents happen. That's what family is for. We clean up together. And that's when the most insane thing ever happened. Everything returned to normal. No screaming or violence, just laughter. In that moment, these were my grandparents. This was my family, and I belonged here. The pretending hurt more than any beating ever had. During cake, Tom caught my eye and tapped his watch. Ashley mouthed, trust fund. Right. Maya. Ellen kept glancing between me and Tom during the birthday song. He has your nose, she told Tom, but nothing else. Isn't that strange? Tom's laugh came out too high. Frank clinked his glass. Before we open presents, there's something important. He pulled out a leather folder. We started this trust fund when you were born. Been adding to it every birthday, even the ones we missed together. 278,000, Ellen added softly. We invested well, for your future, Ellen interrupted, looking at Tom meaningfully. Family helps family. Tom nodded too eagerly. That's so generous, Mom. The papers appeared. Official. Terrifying. Right here, sweetheart. Ellen guided my hand to the line. Your full name. But she held the pen back for just a moment. Thomas William Marison Jr. You know how to spell Marison, right? With 2 R's? Her eyes never left my face. Some people spell it wrong. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My fingers wrapped around the pen but wouldn't move toward the paper. Ellen's eyes stayed locked on my face while I tried to remember how to breathe normally. The weight of Maya in her wheelchair back at the group home pressed down on my chest. I set the pen on the table and my hand shook so bad it rolled off onto the floor. I need to use the bathroom, came out of my mouth in a cracked whisper. Ellen nodded real slow, but her palm stayed flat on those papers, like she was protecting them. Tom opened his mouth to say something, but Frank's hand landed heavy on his shoulder. Ashley's face went white, then red, then white again, as I pushed my chair back. The bathroom was down a hallway covered in family photos I'd never seen before. My legs felt like jelly walking past all those pictures of a kid who wasn't me. The bathroom door clicked shut, and I turned the lock with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. Cold water from the fancy gold faucet splashed over my face and down my new shirt collar. That's when I saw the photo hanging next to the mirror. A toddler with blonde curls grinned at the camera with a dark birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his neck. My hand went to my own neck, where there was nothing but smooth skin. The door handle rattled, and Ashley pushed her way in before I could stop her. Her fingers dug into my shoulder hard enough to leave marks through the shirt fabric. She hissed about the money and Maya and how we'd get nothing if I messed this up. Her breath smelled like the wine she'd been drinking all afternoon. I pushed past her and said, maybe they could just pay the hospital directly for Maya. Ashley's eyes went crazy, and she grabbed my arm harder. That's not how this works, she said through clenched teeth. Something about the way she said it made my stomach drop even more. Back in the living room, Ellen was on her phone talking to someone about paperwork and legal requirements. Tom's face had gone gray, and Ashley started talking fast about about how lawyers weren't necessary. Ellen held up one finger to silence them and kept talking to whoever was on the phone. Celestine Hassan will be here in 20 minutes, Ellen announced after hanging up. Frank nodded like this was totally normal, while Tom looked like he might throw up. The cousins had moved to the couch and kept stealing glances at me. Ellen suggested I should call Maya to tell her about the birthday party while we waited. My fingers fumbled with the phone as I dialed the group home number I knew by heart. Instead of Maya's voice, Colette Hahn, our caseworker, answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" she asked right away, like she could hear something wrong through the phone. I tried to talk normal about a birthday party and a gift, but my voice kept catching. Colette's tone changed, and she started asking careful questions about where I was and who I was with. She mentioned something about fraud being serious and hospital charity programs that could help instead. Ellen watched me the whole time with those sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. After I hung up, Frank raised his glass and said we should toast to family. Everyone lifted their drinks, but mine slipped a little and wine splashed on my pants. Ellen started telling a story about when I was supposedly 5 and had a pet hamster named Mr. Whiskers. She watched my face while she talked about how the hamster escaped, and we found it in the garage 3 days later. I just smiled and nodded, even though I'd never had any pet in my whole life. The cousins pulled me over to their corner and started asking about soccer camp from last summer. Ashley had mentioned it in the car, so I tried to remember what she said. I talked about drills and scrimmages and how hot it was on the field. One cousin, a girl with braces, frowned and said, "The camp got canceled last year because of flooding." My mouth went dry and I mumbled something about maybe it was the year before. The room felt smaller and smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. Tom kept checking his watch, and Ashley's smile looked painted on her face. Ellen never stopped watching me, even when she was talking to other people. Frank showed me more photos from the album and pointed out birthdays and vacations I'd never been on. Each picture was another lie I had to pretend to remember. The doorbell rang and everyone went quiet for a second. Ellen stood up smooth as silk and said that must be Celestine. Tom actually grabbed the back of a chair like he needed it to stay standing. Ashley's painted smile cracked, and she started saying this was all unnecessary for a simple family transfer. Ellen just walked to the door like she hadn't heard a word. The lawyer who came in wore a navy suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive. She shook hands with Ellen and Frank, but barely looked at Tom and Ashley. Her eyes landed on me and stayed there for a long moment. "This must be the birthday boy," she said, but it didn't sound like a happy birthday wish. Ellen explained about the trust fund and the papers, while Celestine nodded and pulled out her own documents. She asked for my birth certificate, and Tom fumbled with excuses about leaving it at home. The lawyer's eyebrow went up, but she just made a note on her yellow legal pad. Tom's face turned red, and sweat started rolling down his forehead, while Celestine kept writing on her pad. The way Ellen keeps testing this kid with those specific questions about spelling and birthmarks makes me wonder if she's known something was off from the very beginning. Her careful watching and that perfectly timed lawyer arrival feels less like coincidence and more like she's been quietly gathering evidence while letting this whole charade play out for her own reasons. His hands shook as he loosened his tie, and Ashley grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. The lawyer looked up from her papers and said she couldn't process any legal transfer without proper ID and birth certificates. Tom wiped his face with his sleeve and mumbled something about getting the documents from the car, but his mom grabbed my shoulder. She guided me toward the kitchen while Tom followed us with quick steps that made the floor creak. Once we got past the swinging door, Tom pushed me against the counter, and his breath smelled like coffee and fear. He whispered that his mom was always like this, always making things harder than they needed to be. His fingers dug into my shoulders as he begged me to just sign the papers when we got a chance. The way his voice cracked made me realize he needed this money just as bad as I did. Ashley appeared in the doorway and nodded at him before Ellen called my name from the living room. Back in the main room, Ellen sat on the couch and patted the spot next to her with that soft smile. She started humming something quiet and asked if I remembered the special song she used to sing at bedtime. The melody sounded pretty, but I had no idea what she was talking about. I mumbled that I didn't really remember much from being little, and her face changed just a bit. She patted my hand anyway, but her fingers felt colder than before. One of the cousins, a girl with braces, pointed at me and mentioned I seemed way shorter than last time. She said it had only been 6 months since Christmas, and I should have grown at least a couple inches. Ellen nodded slowly and added that my eyes looked different too, though she couldn't figure out exactly how. Ashley jumped in fast, saying I'd been really sick lately with some stomach thing that made me lose weight. The cousins started asking questions about what kind of sick, but I excused myself to find the bathroom. Walking down the hallway, I passed family photos showing that blonde kid at different ages. Next to a door frame, I spotted pencil marks with dates and heights written in careful handwriting. The marks for Tommy Jr. showed someone who should be at least 4 inches taller than me right now. My throat got tight as I traced the pencil lines with my finger and did the math in my head. The most recent mark from 3 months ago put him at 5'2", but I was barely 4'10". My stomach twisted into knots as the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. These nice people trusted their son, and I was helping him steal from them. The cake and presents and hugs all felt like poison now, but Maya's face floated in my mind. She got weaker every day in that wheelchair, and without this money, she would die for sure. I forced myself to walk back toward the party, even though every step felt wrong. Ashley caught caught me near the guest bathroom and pushed me inside before locking the door behind us. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of Maya looking pale and skinny in her hospital bed. She reminded me that my sister could die without this transplant, and we both knew it was true. The manipulation was obvious, but it worked because Maya really was dying, and this was our only chance. Her grip on my wrist left red marks as she made me promise to keep going with the plan. Back outside on the patio, I found Tom talking to Frank about something while sweat still dripped down his neck. Frank turned to me and asked about the hospital Maya was in and how the payment stuff worked. I explained what little I knew about the transplant list and the deposit they needed up front. Frank seemed really interested and asked specific questions about which hospital and which doctors were involved. Ellen joined us carrying a tray of cookies and listened carefully to every word I said about Maya. Tom kept trying to change the subject, but his dad waved him off and kept asking me questions. Celestine came outside holding her briefcase and explained that any trust fund transfer would need proper banking channels. She mentioned it would take at least 3 business days to process once they had all the documentation. The notary would need to verify everything, and multiple forms of ID would be required by law. Tom and Ashley looked at each other with panic in their eyes as Celestine kept listing requirements. She said the bank would need to verify signatures and run background checks on everyone involved in the transfer. The whole process could take up to a week if there were any issues with the paperwork at all. My chest got hot with anger as I realized their promise to split the money tonight was impossible. They lied about the timeline just like they were lying about everything else in this mess. I felt stupid for believing any of their promises when they couldn't even get the basic facts right. Tom pulled Ashley aside and they whispered urgently while Frank watched them with narrowed eyes. Ellen touched my shoulder gently and asked if I was feeling okay because I looked upset about something. The party continued around us, but everything felt different now that I knew the truth about the timeline. Ellen's fingers squeezed my shoulder while she waited for an answer, but I just stared at the trust fund papers. Maybe we should handle all this properly tomorrow when the banks are open, she said slowly. Ashley's head snapped up and she started saying something about having plans, but Frank cut her off. That's a great idea. One more night with our grandson would be wonderful. My hands shook as I nodded, because maybe I could find another way to help Maya without stealing from these people. Tom's face went white and Ashley kept trying to argue, but Ellen was already leading me inside to show me the guest room. The attic bedroom had slanted ceilings and smelled like cedar and old books. Ellen brought up fresh sheets and helped me make the bed while Frank carried up a basket of snacks and juice boxes. They both hugged me goodnight and Ellen's eyes got wet again before she closed the door. I waited until their footsteps faded down the stairs, then pressed my ear against the floor. Ellen's voice drifted up through the old wood, asking Tom if this was like last time when they brought someone else. Tom kept denying it, but his voice cracked and I heard Ashley hissing at him to shut up. My stomach twisted into knots, realizing I wasn't even their first try at this con. The house got quiet after midnight, and I crept downstairs to find a phone. The kitchen had an old yellow one on the wall, and I dialed the hospital number from the crumpled paper in my pocket. After 3 transfers, I reached someone named Elisabetta Lynn, who said she was an administrator. She explained that directed donations were possible but needed verification and lots of paperwork. The process takes several weeks, but it's completely legitimate if done properly, she said in a kind voice. I told her my sister was really sick and asked if there were other ways to get help. Elisabetta paused, then gently suggested I could talk to a social worker who knew about charity care options. There are programs specifically for children in foster care or group homes, she said softly. She gave me her direct number and told me to call anytime, day or night, if I needed help. For the first time, an adult was actually trying to help instead of just using me. I hung up and crept back upstairs but stopped when I saw a box in the hallway closet. Inside were baby things, including a tiny hospital bracelet that said Baby Marison with a date. I did the math in my head, and the real Tommy would be almost 10 now, not 8, like me. The truth hit me like cold water, and I sat there holding that tiny bracelet. Frank's footsteps on the stairs made me shove everything back in the box. He sat on my bed and started talking about all the things we'd do together. I've been saving for your college since you were born, and this summer we'll go fishing at the lake. He talked about teaching me to drive someday and going to baseball games. Every word hurt because he was talking to someone who didn't exist anymore. I'm sorry about spilling the lemonade earlier, I whispered. Frank laughed and ruffled my hair. You apologize too much for a kid, you know that? He studied my face in the moonlight. You used to be more confident, more rough and tumble, but I guess kids change. The observation hung between us, and I held my breath waiting for him to figure it out, but he just kissed my forehead and said goodnight again. The next morning, Ellen woke me up early, saying she wanted to take me to the farmer's market, just the 2 of us. Tom and Ashley were still asleep, and Frank was reading the paper when we left. The market was crowded with people buying vegetables, and Ellen held my hand tight as we walked through. So tell me about your dinosaur collection, she said casually while picking through tomatoes. Ashley said you love them so much. My mouth opened before I could stop myself. Actually, they kind of scare me, especially the T-Rex with all those teeth. Ellen's hand tightened on mine, but her expression didn't change as she paid for the vegetables. We walked to the car in silence, and she loaded the bags in the trunk. In the parking lot, Ellen stopped walking and turned to face me directly. You're not my grandson, are you? She asked quietly. The words hit me like a punch, and tears started burning my eyes. I can see you're a child who needs help, though. so tell me what's really happening here. She asked about Maya, and everything spilled out in chunks between sobs. I told her about the group home and how they hit us when we messed up. I told her about Maya's wheelchair and the surgery that cost more than we'd ever have. I told her how Tom and Ashley promised to pay if I pretended to be their son. Ellen didn't yell or pull out her phone to call the police. She just wrapped her arms around me and held me while I cried harder than I ever had. Did they threaten you if you didn't do this? She asked gently. Something doesn't add up about Tom and Ashley knowing exactly which kid to pick from that group home. How did they know about Maya's illness and that I'd be desperate enough to go along with this? I nodded into her shoulder, unable to form words through the tears. Listen to me very carefully, she said, pulling back to look at my face. No one is going to hurt you or your sister ever again. She helped me stand up, and we walked back to the house together. Tom was already inside, pacing back and forth across the living room like a caged animal. His shirt had dark spots under the arms, and his face looked red and blotchy. Ashley jumped up from the couch the second we walked in. Where the hell did you two go? Her voice came out sharp and high. Ellen didn't even look at her son and just guided me to sit on the couch. We need to discuss Maya's medical situation and how we can help properly. Tom stopped pacing, and his face went through this crazy change from confused to scared to angry in about 3 seconds. His hands kept opening and closing into fists. What are you talking about, Mom? Ellen sat down next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. This child needs help for his sister, and we're going to provide it the right way. Ashley started laughing, but it sounded fake and forced. We were already helping them. Tom moved closer to where I was sitting, and I could smell the sweat coming off him. Mom, you don't understand what's happening here. Ellen stood up and faced her son. I understand perfectly. The room got so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tom grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the kitchen. We need to talk to him alone for a minute. His fingers dug into my skin as he dragged me through the doorway. In the pantry, he shoved me against the shelves and leaned in close. You ruined everything, you stupid, worthless kid. Spit hit my face when he talked. Do you have any idea what you've done? His grip got tighter, and I felt my arm going numb. Frank appeared in the doorway so fast I didn't even hear him coming. He grabbed Tom's hand and pulled it off my arm with this strength I didn't know old people could have. Don't you ever touch him like that again? His voice was low and dangerous in a way that made Tom step backward. Dad, I was just... Frank moved between me and Tom. I said never again. Tom's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. The phone in the kitchen started ringing and Ashley ran to answer it. We could all hear her talking, even though she tried to keep her voice down. Yes, this is Ashley Marison. A pause. Oh, hi, Celestine. Another pause. Write the documents. Her voice got higher. We have them somewhere. Ellen walked into the kitchen and took the phone from Ashley's hand. Hello, Celestine. This is Ellen Marison. She listened for a moment. Yes, I understand completely that without proper ID, no notarization can happen. Ashley started talking fast about how they had lost some paperwork in a move and could get copies soon. Ellen held up her hand to stop her. We'll handle this properly, or not at all. She hung up the phone and looked at Tom and Ashley. Both of you need to leave my house right now. Tom's face turned purple. Mom, you can't be serious. Ellen walked to the front door and opened it. I'm completely serious. They left, but Ashley kept yelling things from the driveway about how I was a liar and they were trying to help. Frank took me upstairs to what used to be Tom's old room. Comic book posters covered the walls and trophies lined the shelves. You can rest here for a bit. He closed the door behind him when he left. I sat on the bed and noticed Ellen's jewelry box on the dresser across the hall through the open bathroom door. One of those necklaces could probably pay for Maya's whole surgery. My feet moved without me telling them to, and suddenly I was standing in their bedroom. The jewelry box was made of dark wood with little flowers carved into it. I opened it and saw rings and necklaces that looked more expensive than anything I'd ever seen. My hand reached for a gold chain with a big diamond on it. Maya needed this money so bad. But then I remembered Ellen holding me while I cried and telling me no one would hurt us again. My hand pulled back and I closed the box. I walked out of their room and went back to sit on Tom's old bed. Ellen knocked on the door a few minutes later. We're going for a drive. Ashley's car was pulling back into the driveway as we got into Ellen's Mercedes. Where are you taking him? Ashley shouted through her window. Ellen didn't answer and just kept driving. We pulled up to my group home and my stomach dropped. Is this where you live, sweetheart? I nodded and felt my face get hot. The building looked even worse than usual with its peeling paint and broken fence. Ellen got out and waited for me to lead the way inside. Maya was in the common room watching TV with some other kids. Maya, this is Ellen. Maya's eyes got huge. Are you our new mom? She whispered. I had to shake my head. No, she's just a friend. Ellen knelt down next to Maya's wheelchair. Your brother told me you're very brave. Maya smiled, and it made my chest hurt. Colette walked into the room wearing her usual business suit. Can I help you? Her voice was professional, but I could tell she was being protective. I'm Ellen Marison, and this is one of your kids. Colette looked at me, and then back at Ellen. Perhaps we should talk in my office. They went down the hall, and I stayed with Maya. She's really nice, Maya said. Is she rich? I nodded. She has grandkids? Maya asked. Sort of, I said. We could hear voices from the office, but not the words. After about 20 minutes, they came back out. Colette looked serious, but not angry. Outside in the parking lot, Ashley was waiting by Ellen's car. You lying little brat! She ran toward me, but Tom grabbed her arms. You betrayed us after we offered to help. I felt something break inside me. You're the liars. You used me. Tom had to hold Ashley back as she tried to lunge at me again. Frank showed up in his truck. Hey kiddo, wanna go hit some balls? He looked at Tom and Ashley. Ashley. Everyone needs to cool off. The batting cages were mostly empty on a Tuesday afternoon. Frank showed me how to hold the bat different and adjust my feet. Elbows up a bit more. The ball came at me, and I swung hard. It connected with a satisfying crack. Good one. We stayed there until my arms felt like jelly. Frank never mentioned that I was batting with my right hand now. That evening, back at their house, Celestine's car was in the driveway. She was in the living room with Ellen and Frank going through a stack of papers. The fraud charges alone could result in 5 to 10 years, she was saying. Improper disbursement of trust funds adds another 3 to 5. Ellen's face got harder with each word. And conspiracy to commit fraud makes it federal. Celestine kept explaining all the laws Tom and Ashley had broken or tried to break. Ellen turned to me. Do you have the hospital contact? I gave her the card with Elisabetta's name on it. Ellen dialed the number right there. Hello, Ms. Lynn. This is Ellen Marison, and I'd like to discuss making a legitimate donation for a patient's treatment. Her voice sounded completely different from when she talked to me. This was her business voice. Yes, I understand the process. She wrote notes on a yellow pad while she talked. We can meet tomorrow morning. She hung up and looked at me with this weird expression I couldn't read. The rest of dinner was quiet, except for the sound of forks on plates and Tom's knee bouncing under the table, making everything shake a little. Frank kept clearing his throat like he wanted to say something, but never did. After we finished eating, I helped clear the table, and that's when Tom grabbed my arm in the hallway and pulled me outside to the porch. His hands were shaking, and he looked smaller than before, like all the air had gone out of him. He told me they were drowning in debt from some crypto thing that went bad, and his parents' money was their only way out. He said they were about to lose their house and everything they owned. His voice cracked when he talked about how they'd already sold Ashley's car and most of their furniture. I just stood there watching moths circle the porch light while he went on about interest rates and bankruptcy lawyers. Ashley came out carrying 2 beers, and her eyes were all red and puffy. She started telling me about IVF treatments that cost $40,000 and how they gave up their baby because they couldn't afford formula and diapers back then. She wanted me to understand, but all I could think about was Maya in that hospital bed with tubes everywhere. I told them Maya mattered more than their debt, and Ashley's face went hard like I'd slapped her. Tom just stared at his beer bottle, peeling the label off in little strips. Later that night, my phone buzzed, and it was Colette from the group home. She said what I was doing could be felony fraud, and I could end up in juvie for years. She told me Maya's doctors were working on charity applications, but I needed to stop this whole thing right now before cops got involved. My hands got so sweaty, I almost dropped the phone. The word felony kept bouncing around in my head like a pinball. I sat on the guest bed for hours, just staring at the ceiling fan go around and around. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya's face, and then jail bars, and then Ellen's kind smile all mixed together. By morning, I knew I couldn't sign those papers no matter what happened next. The relief felt like taking off shoes that were way too tight. At breakfast, Ellen made pancakes and bacon, but I couldn't eat any of it. My stomach felt like it was full of rocks. I looked right at her and told her I wasn't really her grandson, just some foster kid who needed money for his sister. The words came out all jumbled about how her hug was the first real one I ever got, and how the food tasted like what I imagined home would taste like. I told her about Maya and the tubes and the wheelchair, and how scared I was all the time. Maya asking if Ellen's their new mom makes me wonder what these kids have been through to jump to that thought so fast. Frank showing up at exactly the right time to stop Tom from hurting this kid. That timing seems awfully convenient, doesn't it? Ellen's eyes got wet, and she put down her coffee cup so hard it rattled the saucer. She said she wouldn't call the cops, but there wouldn't be any trust fund money either. She'd work with Celestine at the hospital to find legal ways to help, but I had to leave today. The mix of relief and disappointment made my chest feel hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides. Tom and Ashley showed up in the kitchen, and that's when everything exploded. Ellen laid out everything she knew about their lies, and Tom tried denying it at first, then switched to blaming me, then started begging. Ashley screamed that they were choosing some random kid over their own son. Her face got all red and splotchy, and she knocked over the orange juice pitcher, which spread across the counter like liquid sunshine. Frank's voice got quiet and dangerous when he told them they were cut off completely, and the trust would go to finding their real grandson. Tom's whole body seemed to cave in on itself like an empty soda can being crushed. Ashley turned on me with her finger pointing like a weapon, saying she'd make trouble at the group home and tell everyone I was a thief and liar. Tom just sat there mumbling about how I ruined their last chance over and over like a broken record. Neither of them said Maya's name even once, like she didn't exist at all. Ellen stood up from the couch and grabbed her purse while Frank put his hand on my shoulder and steered me toward the door without saying anything to his son. The walk to their car felt like it took forever, with Tom still sitting there like a broken toy, and Ashley following us outside yelling about lawyers and police reports and how she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of kid I really was. Frank opened the back door of their Mercedes, and I climbed in, while Ellen got in the passenger seat, and nobody said anything as we pulled away from that huge house. The leather seats were cold, and I pressed my face against the window, watching the mansions turn into regular houses, then apartments, then finally the chain-link fence of the group home. Ellen turned around twice to ask if I was okay, but I just nodded because what else was there to say? Frank pulled into a McDonald's drive-thru and ordered a Big Mac meal without asking what I wanted, and handed it back to me along with a chocolate chocolate shake. The fries were hot and salty, and I ate them one by one, trying not to think about how this was probably the last nice thing anyone would do for me. When we got to the group home, Frank came around to my door and reached into the trunk, pulling out the baseball glove from earlier. He showed me how to work the oil into the leather using small circles, and made me promise to keep doing it every week to keep it soft. The glove smelled like summer and possibility, and felt heavier than it should in my hands, like it was the only real thing from this whole crazy day. Ellen stayed in the car, but she watched through the window as Frank squeezed my shoulder one more time before getting back in and driving away. Over the next week, Colette spent hours on the phone with someone from Ellen's lawyer's office, going through paperwork and medical records and insurance forms. She had me sign things and answer questions about Maya's condition and treatment timeline, while the hospital charity department sent over stacks of documents. Nobody was lying anymore, which felt weird, but also kind of good, even though the process moved slower than frozen honey. My phone started buzzing with texts from blocked numbers, saying things about how I'd never get adopted, and how Ashley would make sure every foster family knew I was a thief and a liar. Colette took screenshots of everything and filed reports with the police and child services, but the messages kept coming anyway. They didn't scare me as much as they probably should have, because I'd been through worse than mean texts from some lady who tried to use me to steal money from her own parents. 2 weeks later, Colette drove me to the hospital where Elisabetta from the transplant team sat us down in a small office with Maya's charts spread across the desk. She explained that an anonymous donor had agreed to cover 30% of Maya's treatment costs through the proper channels, which meant real paperwork and real money, not some scam. Maya would move up the transplant list from position 43 to position 12, which wasn't a guarantee, but it was better than watching her get weaker every day. Ellen showed up at the group home the next Tuesday, carrying a bag from the bookstore and a stuffed elephant that was bigger than Maya's whole wheelchair. She was polite to me, but kept her distance, which made sense after everything that happened. She sat next to Maya and asked about her favorite books and what subjects she liked in the school, and actually listened to the answers instead of just pretending to care. Maya told her about the butterfly unit they were doing in science, and Ellen took notes on her phone like it was the most important thing in the world. The group home phone rang during dinner one night, and Colette answered it, then deleted something from the voicemail without playing it out loud. Later, she pulled me aside and said Tom had left a message blaming me for ruining his relationship with his parents and destroying his family, but she wanted to know if I wanted to press charges for the fraud thing. I told her no, because what was the point when Maya still needed help and making enemies wouldn't fix anything. A detective came by the next morning with a recorder and asked me to tell the whole story from the beginning while Colette sat next to me. He made it clear I was a victim, not someone in trouble, and that the report would show I was just a kid they tried to use for their scam. Tom and Ashley got formal warnings, but no charges since Ellen and Frank decided not to pursue it, which the detective said was probably for the best. Ellen hired a private investigator to look through court records and adoption files, trying to find her actual grandson who was out there somewhere with some other family. I realized I was just a stand-in for someone else's life, but for those few hours at that party, I was seen as a real person who mattered, and both things could be true at the same time. Maya started new medications that made her less tired, and she could go back to the school 3 days a week in the mornings. The reality that she was still number 12 on a list of kids waiting for kidneys settled over us like fog, but at least there was hope now, instead of just counting down days. We played cards in her hospital room during her dialysis sessions, and I taught her the games Frank had taught me with the baseball glove still sitting on my dresser at the group home, smelling like oil and possibilities. 3 months later at the school soccer tryouts, I ran down the field with 30 other kids trying to make the team. The ball came my way, and I kicked it toward the goal, but missed by 5 feet. Instead of the usual voice in my head calling me worthless, I heard Frank saying those 2 words he'd taught me in his backyard. Good try. The coach made us run suicide drills until 2 kids threw up behind the bleachers. When they posted the roster outside the gym the next morning, my name sat at the bottom of the junior varsity list. I'd made a team for the first time in my life. That same week, an envelope arrived at the group home, addressed to Maya's medical fund at the children's hospital. Colette handed it to me during dinner with this weird look on her face. Inside was a donation receipt for $48,000 paid directly to the hospital billing department. No note came with it, but I knew. The handwriting on the envelope had those same careful loops Ellen used when she'd written my fake name on that trust fund paperwork. One evening after Maya's dialysis, I took the long way back from the hospital and found myself walking past their neighborhood. The big houses looked the same with their perfect lawns and 3-car garages. I stopped across the street from Frank and Ellen's house and watched through the fence. Frank stood in the backyard tossing a baseball with some kid maybe 7 years old. Could have been a real grandchild or just the neighbor's kid. The boy missed the catch and the ball rolled into the rose bushes. Frank just smiled and helped him dig it out, showing him how to position his glove better. I kept walking but felt good knowing Frank had someone to teach. Back at the group home, I started working with this 6-year-old kid named Marcus, who'd just arrived from a bad placement. He saw Frank's glove on my bed and asked if I'd show him how to play. We went out to the cracked parking lot behind the building where I taught him the basics Frank had shown me. Marcus threw like he was swatting flies and couldn't catch anything that came within 10 feet of him. When he missed for for the 20th time and started getting frustrated. I heard myself saying it. Good try. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but also right somehow. We practiced every day after school until his throws started going somewhat straight. Another month crawled by with Maya still waiting on the transplant list. Then Colette burst into the rec room one afternoon with tears in her eyes. A matching donor had come through the system, and Maya got bumped to number 3 on the list because of her deteriorating condition. We still needed another $30,000 for the surgery costs not covered by the state insurance, but Colette said new charity options were opening up. The waiting felt like drowning in slow motion, but at least it was honest waiting with real hope attached. Every Sunday, I oiled Frank's glove the way he'd shown me, working the leather with the special oil until it turned soft and flexible. The smell filled our shared room and made the other kids complain, but I didn't care. Sometimes I slept with it next to my pillow. This one real thing from a family that was never mine, but taught me what belonging could feel like. Tom and Ashley getting cut off completely feels like such a quick shift from parents who seemed so careful about keeping up appearances. I wonder what Frank and Ellen really knew all along about their son's problems with money and honesty. It smelled like possibility and patience, and the idea that missing didn't mean failing. Colette mentioned during breakfast one morning that Tom and Ashley's house had gone into foreclosure, according to the public records she checked for safety reasons. She wanted to make sure they wouldn't try to contact me again, or pull another scam with some other desperate kid. I pushed my eggs around my plate and felt nothing about it. No satisfaction that they'd lost their house, no pity for whatever situation had led them there. They were just strangers who'd tried to use me and failed when Ellen saw through their lie. Late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that moment Ellen asked if I knew how to spell Marison with 2 R's. She'd known right then I was a fraud, some random kid they'd grabbed to fool her into releasing the trust fund. But she'd still held me when I cried over spilled lemonade. She'd still called me sweetheart and sent money for Maya, even though I'd lied to her face. I wouldn't sign away my name for anyone now, but I was grateful I got to pretend for those few hours that I belonged somewhere safe with people who said good try instead of stupid failure. Thanks for tagging along with me through all these twists and turns today. Kinda crazy, but honestly pretty fun to share it all with you. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.